I'm Danielle. Ayan. I'm the program director for GIS at GTRI, which is Geographic Information Systems at the Georgia Tech Research Institute, and conference chair for this event, Spatial Plexus 2012. This is our first panel. This panel is titled GIS for Facilities Management and Operations, and we have three distinguished panelists to talk to you here. They'll speak for 5 to 7 minutes, and then we want your thoughts and discussion for the remainder of the time. I have Andy Smith with me here to my left from Bentley to talk about GIS and Building Information Management Convergence. Next to him is John Young with Environmental Systems Research Institute to discuss ArcGIS for Facilities, the next generation of intelligent facility mapping. And then Barbara Sullivan with the Georgia Tech Research Institute discussing GIS is fundamental for planning and facilities management. So if you heard Barbara a minute ago, she's not a GIS professional, but she can bring the business architecture perspective, business perspective to this discussion.
I'm Andy. I'm with Bentley Systems. We're a solution provider for infrastructure, including geospatial applications, roadway and bridges, building information modeling, and all aspects of infrastructure. I am proud to be here today because I'm actually a Georgia Tech alumni. I graduated from the College of Architecture in 1981. I look back at that and go, how did I ever do that? So when the young lady asked before who's a registered professional, she asked the weird question, who's an engineer? Did I raise my hand? Of course not. I'm an architect, but I understand urban design and planning, so it's important to me. So if we listen to Dave's opening comments this morning, we'll start with a pop quiz. What was challenge number 5? Anybody remember? Yes, sir.
Play nice.
Play nice, absolutely. So remember, I'm the BIM guy in a geospatial world. So let's get started with the presentation. So the question I would propose to you, can geospatial data and building information modeling coexist to solve a problem for the facility engineer and to improve business performance? Another way to frame the question might be is, what data do I need? And how would I present that data to people that need it to make these informed decisions about facilities to improve their performance? Well, if we think back over time, pencil-aided design or drawings, they communicated extremely well. Broadacre City here by Frank Lloyd Wright was a great urban plan, and it communicated its intent. But did it really contain all the data really needed to sell the idea to the community? Well, of course not. The modern day media today is a geospatial application, one that can be searched and queried, thematic reporting for environmental impact, utility analysis, and land planning. This is the modern day media for communicating creative ideas and solving problems. But our professionals have been to Hollywood, and they're very comfortable looking at three-dimensional computer models. They're comfortable with navigating these models of engineering detail to help them understand the facilities. So the question is, where is the bridge between a geospatial thematic map and deep, rich engineering modeling? Could I propose to you that the 3D model, the BIM, is the new graphical user interface to facility information? Well, let's dig a little deeper. The debate is really about data modeling, and where does this data exist, and what is the level of detail? Geospatial applications are great for thematic mapping and visual reporting and consolidating data, but do we really want to put this heavy, engineering accurate, detailed BIM data in a geospatial application? I would propose to you not, that they both can coexist, play nice in the sandbox together to provide data-rich media for facility managers to make decisions. So, I'm a facility manager with a portfolio of buildings. Don't I really want to start with a portfolio view of all of my facilities, either in the same city, a campus like Georgia Tech, or retail outlets across the United States? And with a simple click-through, the first mashup of a BIM is the connection between a geospatial context and the building information model. To begin to understand the context of land planning in relationship to to the building form itself. This data being maintained in the BIM model as well as coming from a geospatial context. And if we have these rich data models, look at all the other things I can do with it. How about energy analysis for optimizing or looking at heating and cooling loads of my facilities, connecting them to building automation control systems to optimize the performance of the building. Now, these BIMs are really virtual models of interdisciplinary information from mechanical, electrical, structural, civil. It's a virtual representation of the facility that you own and operate. Now, I have to go out and fix something. I have to replace a pump. I'm changing a filter in a device. And what better way to take this virtual model and slice it and dice it in a creative way to accelerate the understanding of the individual who has to go out and perform work on this facility. So the dynamic reporting of slicing and dicing is an important aspect of virtual modeling. Now, these models get pretty complex, and isn't it important that if I'm looking at a particular air handler, I can click on it to extend to other useful information, for example, photographs of installed devices as well as the specification of performance of that device. So it's linked to yet another piece of information. And these data-rich models contain data that's captured during design and construction so it can feed your operations and maintenance application. So now we have a mashup between civil information, geospatial information, building information modeling, and now our operations and maintenance application. Go back to a very familiar concept of thematic reporting. And if you really look at the concepts of visual reporting, here's a great example that a BIM model can also be visually reported on. A thematic map of functional use areas or performance of a building. Now, I think we all agree that mobility has had a tremendous impact on our industry of how people use data in the field for both all of design, construction, and operation. Now let's look even further into geospatial modeling as well as building information modeling. Geospatially located a BIM, use my mobile device connected to the building information model, and using augmented reality to go out in the field to do field inspections from a geospatial context related to augmented models of the facility. Now, that's a powerful way to communicate, idea, and interrogate the buildings that you do. This not only works for vertical construction, but also all that stuff that's hidden underneath the ground that's related to the typical things I find out at airports and campuses is, I don't find this stuff until I dig it up. So I would propose to you that yes, geospatial data and building information modeling does coexist today. It's only part of the puzzle of aggregating data from multiple sources, from lease management, building automation control systems, real estate records. It all comes together as a dashboard for a facility owner to make informed decisions about their facility. So in summary, yes, they do coexist today. We deliver solutions today that brings this data together. So a facility manager starts with a map, clicks through a virtual model, dives into the details of performance and information, and is linked to an operations and maintenance application. So play nice, Rule 5, BIM and geospatial do cooperate together.
Well, good morning, everyone. John Young with Esri. Very happy to be here, and I really appreciate Andy's remarks, and I think we're going to hopefully build off of each other really well, and we'll stick with that theme of play nice, because I definitely think it's critical. I think I'm also here today to be an educator in some ways, because folks don't realize just how far GIS for facilities has actually come in the last 6 or 7 years. My role at Esri has kind of been at the forefront of that over the last 6 or 7 years as I've been leading that business practice, primarily on our federal team, but I also support each one of our virtual teams because, of course, facilities cross-cut all of our markets. I changed up my title a little bit. I didn't want to be product specific, and I think we can talk offline about that kind of thing. I'd rather focus on how GIS is supporting the next generation of FM technologies and professionals, GIS professionals, and the opportunities for them as well. Okay, so I kind of wanted to start off, hopefully in a little bit of a comic moment here. We often get asked, as we look across the facilities life cycle, about which is the best tool. There are facilities professionals out there, there are GIS professionals, there are folks, frankly, that support the whole life cycle, including the AEC side on the upstream, as well as planners and folks that do site selection. Try to get this started here. But I think the better question really is not necessarily which is the better tool. I think it's really what is the better integration of the best tools to solve those business problems, right? The practical applications of those technologies as you look across the facility life cycle. And really over this last 6 or 7 years, we've seen a number of folks, users in the community out there, and I'll show you a number of those in just a moment, that have in fact used GIS in that planning and site selection space. They've used it for emergency management, sustainability and environmental assessment, things like this. Where they haven't used it as much is in facilities management. And it's the owner-operator, it's the vendors of the software packages, some of those, that acronym soup I showed you a minute ago in the FM system space, and their business partners that frankly have come to Esri over the last 6 or 7 years and said, hey, we want to include a GIS module in our software. We'd like to use GIS as part of our facilities management and operation set of a business practice. How can GIS help me? Can it be a central organizing principle for me for my data? Does it support interoperability? Does it support contemporary standards? And standards not just for GIS, but standards for the facility and the building owner operator and the like. And I think that we've very much done that. And we've been growing and we're supporting that now. So is there a technology that scales all geographies? Is there a system that allows you to extend the value of your FM, enhance the FM system, and then extend the value of that building and design data that's flowing down through the life cycle? Well, these are good questions, and we do see facilities and GIS professionals teaming up. I use teaming up because that's what we hope we see, and a lot of times that is what we are seeing. And this is not a new phenomenon now. I think about 4 or 5 years ago when we started to sit down as a community and put together the building interior space data model, which is now in its 3rd iteration, that's now evolved into a facility information model, which is part of our local government information model, and now will begin to get entered into each one of our different markets, that we're seeing that they're asking the right questions and we're delivering the right solutions. So let's talk about some of this. Well, what about buildings? Interesting. GIS professionals and GIS users for 20 and 30 years have been building up a foundation of data. We all agree about that? You guys have GIS data? You guys work for folks that have a lot of GIS data? Matter of fact, it makes up the majority, the vast majority of land surface data, infrastructure data, and now increasingly building data. But traditionally, we stopped at the building footprint. I was a landscape architect, land planner. I was very familiar with when I had to switch from my CAD systems to my GIS systems, right? But see, that's changing very quickly, right? The whole notion of having the land, having the infrastructure and the buildings being the Swiss cheese, right, is changing. Folks want to be able to have that model cross-cut, right? They want to be able to have that all be in a common information model, and that's where really what's been a driver as well. And just to give you an idea that this is here again not a young phenomenon, there are a host of users and applications. Whether you look across federal government, whether you look across colleges and universities, when you look across other infrastructure, I show a lot more than that, but okay. There are a lot of users out there. And there's some common questions here, like, so what is the building owner to do? And I'm going to flip through these pretty quickly. We understand that we have big building inventory out there, lots of ages, conditions. We have CAD data that could be of different standards or have different layer. We have CAD data in different ages and forms. BIM data is actually available for a very small fraction of our portfolio, and it's very new, right? So how do we integrate that and take advantage of all it has to offer? And then, of course, the need to integrate. We've seen that owners have a number of very important needs, okay? In other words, they want consistent information on buildings for the entire campus. I need to query and do analysis across all buildings on my campus or in my portfolio, not just for a single building. I need a transactional system. I need to make sure that I'm applying the technology to real business problems. And these are some of those that we've seen with GIS, and we can talk about them more here in a minute on the panel. Well, we're finding that GIS is definitely helping because it provides that highly structured data, being able to work from world to widget, database-centric, supporting IT standards, as well as building specification and classification systems, and now the advent of providing facility mapping and templates and tools. I'm going to throw this slide up here really quickly because we have a new publication that's come out that actually addresses some of the topics that were brought up before about moral ideas and sustainability for the profession. Well, here is the role of GIS technology in sustaining the built environment. It's an ebook. You can look it up. So GIS, cross-cutting, all scales or levels of detail, allow you to analyze and interrogate information and bring it back visually, right? That's really been a driver. The other key, and I think we're going to focus on this a little bit, is utilizing building information in GIS. The ability to have the data interoperability tools to do that, being able to support the different specifications, being able to, in the middle here, the key, thin that data down so that, like Andy said, I want my BIM when I go and look behind the wall, but for my normal everyday facility operations and maintenance, I need to do space management, I need to look at my assets, I need to know type, status, condition. GIS, geographic information systems, like the ones that we have at Esri, right? Those do that kind of thing, but they don't need to include that level of detail. Rather, let the BIM do that and link to it appropriately. The map then also provides that decision support context, right? Esri's coming out with hosts of templates that allow you to do this, whether it's at that portfolio level, as Andy mentioned, or getting all the way down to the types of domain-specific FM use cases like space management and safety and security. And that's really where we see a future. We talked about stories, telling stories earlier, being able to provide the profession with those. Well, templates are a part of that, and being able to provide them from the ground up is very important. And so I think I'll just end with this slide on GIS for facilities, which is, that's 7 minutes right there. Beautiful, I'll end with this slide. So anyway, we'll get into this, but thank you for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, I've already did my disclosure. I'm not a GIS professional. I actually just recently was introduced to Danielle as I came to interview at GTRI. And I'm sitting around a table. It was like a big speed dating setting, where in the course of a day and a half, I met 28 different lab managers and lab directors, and they all talked about what they did. I talked about my background, and I've spent the last 15 years, 10 years in the smart city space, and I was looking for certain kinds of technologies to help me in that space. And at the end of the time, we picked a group, and it happens to be Danielle's group, and it was great. But the person in front of Danielle in this big scenario was a young woman doing urban planning. And I went, oh, that's so exciting. That's exactly where I want to be. I can't wait to start working with you. That's great. I'm excited by urban planning. And Danielle says, so, how do you feel about GIS? And my answer, unfortunately, was not that excited. I expect it. I anticipate it. We use it all the time. I want more from it, but not necessarily exciting, which disappointed her, and she let me know it. So I want to talk to you about 3 examples where I use it. I want to talk to you about what I think are the challenges in that field for my needs. And remember, I'm coming from the business owner, business manager group, and what my wish list is for GIS. So as we talk about buildings and we talk about sites, understand that as a manager in the business arena, Cisco is looking at workplace services. We no longer call it the real estate corporate organization. We no longer call it the facilities management and operations. We call it workplace services because we provide the ability for someone to perform their duties, their work, right? That means that we provide, we don't necessarily provide the IT, but we provide the telephones, digital displays, access to buildings, physical security, safety and security, and to the point where if you're at your home and there's a fire or a natural disaster in your area, our security department that's underneath our workplace services will call you and make sure that you know, if you have any needs. So this all started back in 2000 when we changed from facilities management, real estate to workplace services. And one of the things that got us really thinking this way was, outside of paying this exorbitant salary for, you know, Atlanta and San Francisco and some of the big cosmopolitan areas, what can we do to entice, seduce new candidates, the best candidates in competition with other companies trying to do the same thing, and how do we retain our own employees? So we put together a red team, and it was HR, finance, IT, and real estate. And we said, each of us have our own databases, let's bring it to the table and figure out all the solutions that we can come up with. And I'm gonna just show you 3 of those solutions. So the first solution that we're looking at is how can we reduce employee commute? Because we found that candidates were telling us that they put a circle around their residence, and if they couldn't get to their workplace within 20 minutes, they weren't gonna come work there. And this is back in the year 2000, so they had a chance to do that, right? They had all the power. So we were trying to figure out how do we make sure that we can get an office within 20 minutes of most of the big areas. So we took the Bay Area map, and this is the one that I happen to work on, so I'm familiar with. We laid out every single employee's residence. We laid out big areas of San Jose State, San Francisco, Berkeley, all of the Santa Clara University, the places where we wanted to solicit new candidates. We took the major transportation lines and we started figuring out where do we need to put satellite offices. Then once we've identified those satellite offices, we were able to say, now let's come back and validate over the next 3 and 4 months, do the new candidates that we're getting, are we getting a higher percentage in those outlying areas? We were able to validate our predictive model to say that if we put satellite offices out there, we can in fact entice new candidates and retain employees that we already have. Now remember, this is in the year 2000, so when Danielle says excited by, we had GIS people in our facilities department in the year 2000, 2 of them dedicated to this. At which point Danielle pointed out to me that perhaps our organization being, you know, already pretty computer literate was ahead of the curve. And I keep forgetting that sometimes. The other thing we did was we have, especially in the Bay Area and Atlanta and other places, we have great concern from our employees about, I want to go work for a company that's concerned with the environment. So of course we have a green team, and they look at our products, they look at our services, they look at how we build and design, and they look at how we operate. They also look at how the employees contribute to their own personal CO2, because employees wanted assistance with that. So one of the things we looked at was how can we get people to work without having personal cars for everyone. And you know, it's not a major driving priority, but because we had the tools in place and we had these 2 guys on site, we were able to easily say, what's the map of the employees, where is the major transportation, how can we subsidize the use of that transportation, and then what shuttles can we put in place from the endpoints of those transportation to our campuses based on which employees are getting on the shuttles, and be able to design a pretty robust shuttle system that when I was writing it, I'm about 35 miles south of campus, I was able to get on a train, go to a stopping point, get picked up by a shuttle bus. There were 30 of us on the train being picked up from the shuttle bus and taken to our campus, which is about 8 miles away. That was pretty important. Then we look at how can we reduce our real estate costs. So looking, and I'll just jump to the remote worker program and looking at how we do that. And the reason she's giving me 2 minutes is because she knows that the slides that are coming up next are the ones I like. I happen to start watching the Cupcake Wars at this point, so now you'll see some restaurant references. I am confused by so many cooks in the kitchen. I'd like to have an understanding from an owner's standpoint. If I invest in one tool, do I get the benefits as I go to the next tool? I'd like to understand what the compelling business case is. Tell me the scenarios that make sense. Tell me when to use each tool. Tell me what my benefit will be, and tell me what I'll know about the future from it. And then where are we getting the new team members? And the new team members have to know more than GIS. They have to know about HR databases. They have to know about designing architectures that include security systems. They have to know about how people work and function. They have to be able to present the information in a way that tells me they had a process that they went through, that they can defend that process, that it has predictive value, and that there may be political or social overtones, and know that what those consequences are. So my wish list is I want better visualization of the industry. I would like to know more about the business cases. I'd like to understand the cross-functional standards, and not simply with the BIM and the GIS, but also with HR, IT, other groups, and then educating the next generation to really go outside of the field of GIS and understand the other issues that I'm trying to address as a business owner and as a public sector person in terms of smart cities, smart buildings, smart workplaces. Thank you.
Good stuff, and I really want to hear more from the panelists, but I also, want to hear from you all as well. So they have more slides to offer, they have more information and knowledge, but let's take some comments. Let's start the discussion going, and if you need a little help, I can help with that, but hands from anybody? Okay, Siva.
On the models for BIM or the standards, there are, I don't want to call competing models, or there are several of them out there. Is there any convergence of those?
So if I understand the question, it's really towards, there are multiple BIM models being used in the industry, and is there any convergence? Is that the question, sir?
Yes.
So in our line of work, we come across what we call purpose-built BIMs. There's two answers to this based on who you are in your role. First of all, as a designer, architect, mechanical, electrical, we have design intent models, and those are used for the design, analysis, and simulation to perfect and execute construction documents. The second type of BIM is a for construction BIM. It focuses on means and methods of assembly, temporary work, procurement, cost estimating, material layout, all the things that happen on a construction site. The third type of model is a model for operations. The detail that a constructor uses for temporary work and all the pieces and parts are not necessarily what are needed from an FM perspective. So to the answer of convergence, what we're seeing is a model is started by a design community, handed over to a constructor, and then handed over through operations. And it's the same model. This sort of gets changed and augmented along the way. The point being a high reuse of information, so you're not reinventing and re-entering data. So that's one answer as we look at types of models. The second is, quote, the interoperability story. There are multiple vendors that provide BIM authoring tools. The lead dog in this race is for data file transfer is IFC, Industry Foundation Classes. It's promoted by the Building Smart International, and it's starting to become the de facto standard of exchanging data. The warning is with any type of translations or exchange, it's never 100%. There's some data loss along the way. So I would answer the question, BIM for design, construction, operation, high reuse to leverage the data, and then there's the interoperability issue where IFC seems to be the lead candidate at this time.
Siva, do you mind, can you guys just walk the mic around? I'll point out who's got their hand up next, and that way I can
Noel
I took
Hamey
notes.
from Canberra, Australia. A question that's more related to, I guess, the training and who does the work. Is it the spatial person that integrates the model, or is it the engineer moving the spatial data in there? And that comes around, we were talking yesterday all about the competency model. We really didn't talk about integration of BIM models into, we talked about survey data and things like that coming into the spatial field, but how do you see this area? Who does the job?
If I can get down for a second. So it's been my observation, I think observation of the industry, that once, let's just call it as-built BIM, is handed down to the building owner operator, that job is now on the facility side, or even in some cases we're seeing it as on the GIS technician side, because what we're effectively doing, because we want to maintain the BIM, we need that BIM, but what we would like to do is thin that data down. And so using BIM IFC, which is the specification we use, applying it to the proper data model, which we have, we use the ETL, extract, translate, load routines, which is what that professional typically understands how to use, so that you can then populate that building interior space model for the purposes of maintenance and operation in the GIS, or frankly, just having those spaces that then get related typically to the FM system of record, whether that's a CMMS, IWMS, or what have you.
Can you summarize the question and the answer one more time, like
Sure.
succinctly? It was
Sure.
good information. I just want
Happy to.
make sure it gels with me.
Right. So if I understood the question correctly, it's who is responsible, the end user actually, for taking BIM information, I'll say the as-built information. So we're ready to be commissioned, we're ready to turn the key and go into the building. Who's responsible for integrating that with the other systems of record? It's either going to be the GIS professional or the FM professional. In some cases, you see BIM integrated directly with the FM system, and increasingly we see cases where BIM is brought into your GIS, because there's a lot of GIS data out there, a lot of folks that want to utilize that, and then that typically gets integrated as well with the FM system of record.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that, that why I'm asking that, I'm thinking in terms of the training aspect that we're putting into geospatial, should we putting something into the engineers so they understand more about geospatial and things like that? That was where my question was coming from. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the questions don't just come from the audience. We actually have a panel question for the audience. Go ahead, Barbara.
So as I look at using the GIS data as an underlying mapping, and then looking at modeling and simulation tools to give you predictive value, and I'm cutting across social, economic, ecological things. So for instance, when you show up at your environmental impact report, you're presenting information. So my question is, for those of you who are teaching new people how to do GIS, are you also teaching them about privacy, about if I give you an HR database, do you understand that you're dealing with people's health, age, marital status? Are you teaching them about the politics of any predictive value? Global warming becomes a political issue. So are those things being taught as well? I see some yeses. As a formal part of the study, or is that just, I mean, is there a class on ethics and privacy in GIS?
It's played out in the national news.
I've seen one.
I think it's an interesting option, if not a course, it's certainly a class for each of those issues.
At the technician level, which is where I'm doing training, we don't have space for a class. And however, I made it abundantly clear to all my students that no matter what type of math they make, they have to ensure that no one can identify a person and any condition they may have or anything that might embarrass them, that would out them in any way as far as health, their political affiliations or anything. They have to make sure that the map is of a resolution that they are protected, that people are protected, their privacy. So that's very much emphasized.
I think we will see more as you all become the base
something out there just as a term to pique your interest, and you all will have to follow up on this because I'm not an expert on this subject, but Barry Weller, Dr. Barry Weller from Ontario, Canada, has done a lot of legal expert testimony in the field of GIS, and he's produced white papers and all kinds of presentations about the standard of care and duty of care, period. But when he goes to testify and a city is being asked, like, how did you let this, you know, utility worker blow up because you didn't know that there was a gas line when he was trying to install some other kind of infrastructure, his question is, why weren't you using GIS? I mean, it's there, why weren't you using it? And that's kind of negligent, is what he's insinuating. So it's not exactly to your point, but it's along the lines of ethics and legal responsibility and how can we use our profession and our expertise to be better stewards of our assets.
In response to
We have
that,
another comment over here. Did you want to say something, Andy?
yeah, in response to your standard care of service for geospatial professionals, the same discussion is happening with owner-operators in the building world. I want this built. You have these modern-day tools to help me compress schedules, reduce costs, and reduce change orders. Why aren't you using these modern-day tools to deliver my building? Yeah. Same discussion happened in the architectural community.
I also, well, I guess, I don't know, I'm not a GIS professional. I was using it a long time ago when dark info manuals, I was saying, you know, stretched across my whole room. So, but admitting a bit of prejudice toward the social and environmental and that kind of thing. As far as privacy goes, there's an interesting, tying it into the emergent, you know, complex adaptive. I wanted to ask Tom earlier how he defined intelligent agent, because when you stick 3 or 4 maps together, you'd be surprised what you can find out. It's amazing what information emerges from combinations of data. So relative to the facilities at the very detail level, moving up to the global, et cetera, it's a tough problem. It's tough to know what you can find out. I'll give you one example. We were using the U.S. Census data one time, and we were just, you know, let's see how many Aleutian Indians live in South Carolina. Well, guess what? 2. So now I know who they are and where they live. So the U.S. Census data that's private, that nobody can know anything about, I was able to find 2 specific individuals just by random chance. But records management, personal identifiable information, and that sort of thing, it's not always what your database displays. It's as you combine them and cross these scales of information. I have this term I call quantum scale. When you move, you know, about 12 units across, you cannot see the forest for the trees or the trees for the forest. There's a point where you lose it. And so as you get down into looking at the valves and then expand out to looking at whether the building should have ever been built in the first place, et cetera. Those are, you know, don't have an answer. These are wicked problems, but I just wanted to point it out. So.
Did we have a question back here? And then I'm still coming back to you, Chris.
Art Kalinsky with Pictometry International. I also write a monthly column for Geospatial Solutions, and a couple of the columns I wrote was about BIM and getting back to the BIM issue in GIS. The one thing when I talked to a lot of CAD people in doing a little bit of background on the article that surprised me, we in the GIS community have a tremendous leg up on the people that are doing CAD work. They do beautiful drawings, beautiful work. But you talk to the average CAD person, they do not have any concept of topology, which is, of course, the basis for GIS. And, of course, that's the beauty of a BIM model, is it combines the best of CAD drawings with that topological model linked to databases that you find in a BIM. And so, like I say, I've found that to be the case, and I'm going to ask you, have you found that same thing? And if you have, we should definitely highlight that whenever we're talking in communities that are not exclusively GIS. They have to understand that GIS brings this unique capability.
Just to second that point, I went to a BIM conference a week and a half ago, and I said I was coming to a GIS conference, and I had my head chewed off. You tell those guys to stay out of our building. So I think that there is an opportunity for some understanding of the differences and the different uses and how the overlay works, because it is not a complete separation. It's an overlay, it's an integration. Let's work out how we do that integration. Boy, that was a dangerous conference for me.
So I would reply to your comment by saying that I would agree with you that the geospatial world has been very database centric for years. You live and die by features that are stored in tables and rows and are persisted and visualized in maps. The AEC community has been this paper-based world, but I will tell you that there's a rapid transition from just CAD to data management philosophies. The discussions that are going on data quality management, from data entry, versioning control, and quality assurance for data, because the building information model now contains lots of very rich data about vendors, performance requirements, commissioning data, things that are connected to building automation control systems. So perhaps part of your research was tainted by talking to a CAD manager who's been there for production of drawings and not to the BIM enthusiast and BIM leader who works on integrated projects and brings these people together in a real data management orientation. So our industry is rapidly changing. There's a lot of learning going on, and I think that you'll be surprised how quickly they're catching up.
So I actually have a question for my colleague, Andy, here real quick, because I think it's one that folks that manage what we think of as traditional geographic information system or GIS data. So my comments earlier about land data, the parcel fabric, utilities, infrastructure, this kind of data, and then really how we fit the buildings into that whole geographic fabric. Is everybody familiar with the term fabric when I say that? As GIS professionals, I think we know that what we're talking about is, frankly, when we walk out that door, the entire fabric of the natural and built world and how we represent it thematically. We tend to talk about thematic mapping. My question for Andy is, where do you see the integration of BIM technology as what's being termed as a geospatial technology, right? With GIS, geographic information centric databases, and is there a proper fit for that?
Understand the question, John. I would tell you that the integration with geospatial concepts is really not an integration, it's just a practice of doing work. And what I mean by that, I work with firms every day that start by taking satellite photography, aerial photography, survey data, shape files, and they start by doing master planning activity using a product like Bentley Map to explore the impact related to the site. So they start with geospatial data. Then along comes the civil engineer, the architect, who then puts a building on that site, and they don't convert that data, they just reference that geospatial data in a clever way to understand where utilities hit buildings, to understand adjacent property, usage, and other things related to the site. So that geospatial data is many times used as a performa or a master plan study by an owner, moved seamlessly into building design. It transitions its way into construction, and that same data is just handed over at the end to the owner-operator who then uses it. So in this sort of, we call it federated, meaning data's coming from multiple sources, we just aggregate up that data without converting it to make it seamlessly used by all parties. So it's not necessarily integrated, it's just how is it successfully interwoven into a project process that multiple people can use and leverage to execute against a project.
And in fact, I would say not only that BIM data, at the BIM conference they were talking about also putting in the social information, putting in the HR database. Where are the labs? Where are the people with disabilities we had to notice for our emergency response plan? So putting in an evacuation plan becomes somewhat of a social plan. So more information, all the IT plan went into the BIM plan in some of the facilities I was looking at.
Yeah, so another example of that is that if you're familiar with, I want to build a building. I want 300,000 square feet of a corporate facility or education. You build, someone has to write down the building program. How many square feet do you want and how should it be allocated? But you also get into those social characteristics of adjacency criteria that, you know, this department has to be next to this one. So you have criteria that you then can evaluate designs against to validate, are you solving organizational issues related to it? So that type of embedded knowledge into information models is very useful to present to an owner. A great example is the General Services Administration, who builds courthouses, has been looking at the path of how people move through a building, be it the judge, the jury, the plaintiff, the public, and thou shalt not meet, and it's a very complex problem to solve.